Okay, this is the introductory shiur for the mitzvah of I think it's the 34th mitzvah of the Torah of carrying the aron on your shoulders. So the aron kodesh, not the one in the shul, but the one in the Mishkan or the Beis Hamikdash. There was a mitzvah to carry it on your shoulders. Okay, so if you see the pasuk here in Bamidbar, it says Uvnei Kahat Lo Natan Ki Avodat HaKodesh Aleim Bekataf Isau. So the descendants of Kahat. So that's the tribe of Levi. So they were the ones that carry the aron on their shoulders. In Sefer Yoshua, when the Jewish people are crossing the Yarden, it says Yomer Yoshua el Cohanim le'mor su et aron abrit v'ivru l'fnei ha'am v'yisu et aron abrit v'yachu l'fnei ha'am. So it says that they should take aron. The Cohanim here, it says they should take the aron. Rashi explains su'es aron abris ad achshav nasu haLeviim. So until this point, until they got to the Yarden, with Yehoshua, or excuse me, with Moshe Rabbeinu, it was the Leviim that would carry it. Now that they're getting to the, now that they're getting there with to the Yarden with the aron, now it's not going to be the Leviim anymore, but it'll be the Cohanim that carry it. Okay, so so just the first couple questions here. Why the switch from the Leviim to the Cohanim? Okay, why do we have that? Why do we have that switch here in Sefer Yoshua? Why doesn't it just stay the Leviim? And if it's supposed to be the Cohanim, why didn't the Cohanim originally do it? Okay, the Rambam in the Sefer Hamitzvos says as follows: Hamitzvah lamed daled, Hishit sivanu shiyisu Cohanim ha'aron al ktafehem kishe nirtze laseso so mimakom makom. So the mitzvah is that the Cohanim would carry the aron on their shoulders when they wanted to bring the aron from place to place. V'hu amru yisal is what the pasuk says. Ki avodas hakodesh aleim bekatef yisal. Right, so even though it says that the mitzvah, right, we have here, it says the mitzvah is with the Cohanim, but now we see that the Leviim were the ones carrying it. Okay, so I don't know if that was a glitch there. So even though we see that the Leviim were the ones that the Leviim were the ones that carried it, that's because basically, right, that's only at that time. So the Rambam says that at that time it was the Leviim because the Leviim there weren't enough Cohanim, and since there weren't enough Cohanim, it was left up to the Leviim to carry it. But the mitzvah really is, says the Rambam, is with the Cohanim. So the question is, if the mitzvah is with Cohanim, so how could it be that Leviim carry it just because there aren't enough Cohanim? The mitzvah, it's very difficult to see how the mitzvah can change in that way. Okay, so so how are if the mitzvah is really with Cohanim, why were the Leviim chosen? Just have anybody carry it, have Yisraelim carry it, if there's no mitzvah of Leviim carrying it. Okay, let's go on here. Let's see the Rambam in the Mishnah Torah. So he says as follows: but aron when you carry the aron from place to place, you can't put it on animals to carry it, and you can't put it on a wagon. Because David HaMelech forgot this and put it on a wagon, it's a whole episode in Tanakh. So there was a huge breach that occurred in Uzzah where this happened. Mitzvah not all but rather the mitzvah is to put on the shoulders. Right, because it says it should be on their shoulders. Now the Rambam goes on here and says Halacha Gimel. When it's being carried on shoulders, the Kohanim stand facing each other. So their backs are to the outside. They're facing each other, two Kohanim and then two Kohanim. So and then there's sticks that go through the aron, like the rings of the aron. And you're not allowed to take the sticks out of the rings. So the sticks stay in the rings. The Kohanim hold the aron, and they're facing each other two and two, as opposed to walking facing forward. They're walking facing each other. Okay, and they cannot go out of their rings. Now this is fascinating because these are the only two halachos you have in the entire Mishnah Torah about this. And what does the Rambam leave out? The whole idea of Cohanim. He doesn't mention Kohanim. It should be, first of all, we should see the normal formulation of mitzvahs aseh, right? That should be there. That should say that there's a positive command to carry the aron. It doesn't say anything about carrying a mitzvah to carry the aron. It just says when you do carry it, this is how you have to carry it. And it doesn't Cohanim, Leviim, anything. Here in the Sefer Hamitzvos, he says that the mitzvah shetzivanu shisu hakohanim aron, the mitzvahs that the Cohanim carry. So why doesn't the Rambam bring that up in the Mishnah Torah? That's very strange. Okay, you have one of the principles of a mitzvah that gets as one of the 613 mitzvahs is this the third principle. Says the Rambam, she'ein roi limnos mitzvah she'ein ohages ladoros. You can't count something that's not a mitzvah for all generations. In other words, if there's a mitzvah, let's say that everybody has to stand away from Har Sinai at the giving of the Torah, they have to stand far enough away from Har Sinai. So that's a mitzvah, but that's not one of the 613 mitzvahs because it only existed one time in history. The Amram Tariag mitzvahs nemrulo Moshe Sinai. So it says that there were 613 mitzvahs given to Moshe at Sinai. Mor aliyos zeha mispar hu mispar mitzvah nehages ladoros. So this is the mitzvah that lasts ladoros. Yirtzu bazeh hasimin shadavar shetziva Moshe lo shemanu ki imi menu hu mispar Torah v'kara morasha kilos Yaakov. Okay, so the reason why it has to last for generations is because the Torah is called a morasha. It's called an inheritance. Umitzvah sheinu nehages ladoros. Right, and a mitzvah that doesn't last for generations, aino lo morasha. It's not considered a morasha. It's not an inheritance. An inheritance, by definition, is only something that's going to last for generations because the idea is that it lasts. Sha'amnam yikra yerusha mashi yachmi ladoros. It's only something that's called a mitzvah is only ladoros. A mitzvah, that's only morasha if it lasts ladoros. The Ramban says here. Okay, so. Well, actually, before we get to the Ramban, let's ask this next question. The Aron's place was inside the Beis Hamikdash. As once they built the Beis Hamikdash, the Aron was inside the Beis Hamikdash. It was inside the Kodesh Kodashim. So how is this mitzvah a mitzvah ladoros? If the Aron has a permanent place, and the mitzvah is to carry the Aron, but it was being carried when it was traveling. Once the Mikdash is placed, that's it. It stays. So why is this a mitzvah ladoros? This mitzvah of carrying the aron should not be considered one of the 613 mitzvahs. Okay, the Ramban says, "V'chein mashe shibesh bal halachos b'moroso v'lo yavar o levvim v'omar she'eno noheges ela b'midbar." And that's the Bahag. The Bahag, that's his point, says the Ramban. The Bahag brought up that this doesn't get counted as a mitzvah because it only existed in the desert when the Jews were traveling. Ein hadavar kain, says the Ramban. That's not true. That's not true. Avahi mitzvah noheges b'chol hadoros. Rather, no, this mitzvah does count for all generations. How so? Kozman shistruchu haLeviim maseis masa v'katef. Anytime the Leviim wanted to move around, so they carried it on their shoulders. U'mashnis aru mimenu harav asos mitzvahs asem imasha amru yachol af b'shilo v'beis halavim kain tamid lomar la'avod avodas avoda v'moed lomarti elo zman shavoda b'katef. Says the Ramban, there's a Gemara that talks about the fact that the aron was carried every single time they wanted to move around. It was carried, and not just limited to the midbar. It says there you go. You'd see it's called an avoda, and therefore you see it's a mitzvah ladoros, right? Hari nega kol hayamim. Be'eretz benosam aron v'lo miutu ela she'ino nohages ela b'shas masa b'shivtam b'shilo beis halavim. So this mitzvah existed even past the desert. So it says the Ramban. Therefore, you see that it was a mistake of the Baal Halacha not to count it as one of the 613 mitzvahs. And the Ramban sides with the Rambam here. Okay, that's its idea. Okay, let's go on here. Okay, source number 9. Okay, the Rambam. This is interesting. The Rambam says as follows: Davar baro mefurish b'Torah. We're all the way here at the top in source number 9. Davar baro mefurish b'Torah she mitzvah omedes li'olam olamim. It's clear in the Torah that all mitzvahs last forever. Okay, ein la lo shinui v'lo giron. There's no adding or taking away from one of the 613 mitzvahs. Okay, shenemar. You're not allowed to add to the mitzvahs or take away. all the 613 mitzvahs will exist eternally. They will never change. Now the Rambam says here in source number 10 that if a Navi tells you to violate the Torah, like Eliyahu told the Jewish people that they should offer karbanos in Har Carmel, which was usher. You weren't allowed to offer them on those type of altars there. So Eliyahu was telling them to violate the Torah. Shamalo chutz me'avodas kavim. Any mitzvah that the Leviim tells you to do, so you listen unless it's idolatry. That you're not allowed to listen to. But that's only if the Navi tells you that this thing is a temporary injunction. Okay, that we have to violate the Torah in a temporary way. It could go on Eliyahu b'Karmel, sheikriv ola b'chutz Yerushalayim nivcharas lekach u'makriv b'chutz chayav kari. So like Eliyahu, who told them to give a korban outside of Yerushalayim, which was usher once the korbanos were being given in Yerushalayim, it was usher to give it outside. But since he only temporarily, right? So then, because he was a Navi and he's telling you to violate the Torah on a temporary basis, there's a mitzvah to listen to. The Gam Bezen Nemar love Tishmo. That's there's a mitzvah to listen to the Navi at that point. So if you would have asked Eliyahu, how could you violate the Torah? Torah says you're not allowed to do this. Haya Omer Lo, he would have said, Lo Nemar Ela Hamakriv Bachutz Liolam Chayev Kares. K'moshe Tziva Moshe Avani Akriv Hayom Bachutz B'Dvar Hashem K'dei Lahachish Navi Abal. I'll tell you that Moshe Rabbeinu told you forever you're not allowed to give a korban outside Yerushalayim, but I'm doing this only for right now in order to disprove the idolatrous prophets who are telling you that you should serve other gods. So this is a temporary injunction. So that exists not just for Eliyahu, but all prophets. If they tell you to violate the Torah, you should violate the Torah if it's a temporary injunction. But if the Navi tells you that this mitzvah no longer exists, or we're going to violate the Torah for this is the new mitzvah, right? Misaso b'chenek. So then we kill him. We execute him. Because the Torah is given forever. So temporary injunction is fine. We see that same exact power to take out the Torah, a mitzvah from the Torah for a temporary basis is not just given to the Navi, but is also given to Beis Din. Beis Din can also do this. Even if it's a smaller Beis Din than the original Beis Din that enacted the mitzvah. Shafilu, says the Rambam, divrei Torah yesh l'kol Beis Din lakro harasha. Even a dvar Torah, a Beis Din can come along and take a mitzvah daraisa and change it. Okay. So right, and that's there's different reasons for that. We can go on, but that's the idea that that a Beis Din has the ability to change something for a small amount of time. Okay, but a mitzvah itself can never change. So my question here is, if a mitzvah can never change, how could it be that the mitzvah shifted from Leviim carrying the aron to Cohanim carrying the aron? That's what seems to have happened. So how could that change have happened? Okay, the Ramban here says as follows. Says the Ramban, if you think this mitzvah exists only for Cohanim, that's not true. It's forbidden to say that any mitzvahs in the Torah change. The Leviim originally were allowed to carry it. Now you're going to tell the Leviim that they're not allowed to carry it. That's changing a mitzvah in the Torah, right? You can't do that. Like as we just read, the Leviim nasu b'mei David. The Leviim carried it at the times of David. Even the second time when David HaMelech finally carried it the proper way, it was Leviim that carried it. As it says, "Shenemar v'hiu b'azor Leviim es Leviim no say aron b'ris Hashem chasav chol Leviim hanosim es aron hamishorim aval nemar ki Kohanim Leviim kulam ksherim b'masa min haTorah shekulam nidkaram Leviim." So when it says that the Kohanim should carry it, like we saw in Sefer Yoshua, that's saying that since the Leviim can carry it, for sure Kohanim can carry it because they come from the same shevet. But the mitzvah never changed. And also the parsha says b'nei kahat. Kohanim are also descendants of kahat. Because of Beis he dil Hashem as shevet halevi laseis aron bris Hashem, and it even says that shevet halevi was the one separated to carry the aron la'amod l'fnei Hashem l'shar levarach b'shmo. And says the chinuch la'ikar lefi hadoma k'divrei Ramban shekol shevet kasher l'masa aron. Right, that all of the shevet Levi can carry it, including Cohanim, but Leviim are allowed to carry it. This seems to differ from the Rambam. So our question is, the Rambam in the Sefer Hamitzvos had said that the mitzvah is for Cohanim to carry it, right? So my question here is, are the Ramban, who says that the mitzvah applies to Leviim and Cohanim, and the Rambam disagree? Okay. Going on here. The Rambam says, and these two answers we're going to use, these two sources we're going to use to try to develop our svara. Zera Levi Kula Muvdul Avodas HaMikdash. The tribe of Levi is separated for the service in the Beis Hamikdash. Ne'emar Beis Ahi Hivdil Hashem Es Shevet HaLevi. At this time, Levi was separated. And there's a mitzvah to have a positive command to have the Leviim ready to serve in the Beis Hamikdash, whether they want to or they don't want to. There have to be Leviim ready to serve in the Beis Hamikdash. And the Levi can't say, I'm going to do all the mitzvahs except for some of the work that a Levi has to do. That I'm not going to accept upon myself. No, we don't accept the Levi. He has to accept all of them. In a similar vein, the Rambam says as follows in the next parak in Klei HaKodesh. The Rambam says, Klei HaMikdash, HaKohanim huvdulu bichlal haLeviim. Okay, that Cohanim are separated from the Leviim. The Leviim, and now the Cohanim are separated from the Leviim. Avodas HaKarbanos. They're part of the Avodas HaKarbanos. Shenemar v'yavdil aron lahakdisho kodesh kodashim. Aron was separated to be sanctified of all the sanctified. Kodesh kodashim. Right, and there's a separate mitzvah to separate the Cohanim for the Cohanim. As it says that you should sanctify them because they give korbanos. Okay, that is the introductory shiur that we have, and then I hope Neder to give shiur later. I hope that you'll be there.